Hello everybody, this is your professor from Java Programming, and in this video I would like to finish out the array chapter. So in this video what we would go over are more array programs and also point out some of the features of array list. We will create or we will use a Java program to create a gradebook, and we will go back to our class and object methodology and see how we can design our programs utilizing the class object methodology, but also now using some arrays. And then we'll also get into array list, look into some of the look into some of the methods that I can use from array list, and also look into how we can create a multiple or a program with variable argument in Java. So let's go ahead and get started. So this one, it is again using the arrays, and let me bring on the actual program, and what I will do is basically run the program. So this is my roll dice program where if I would roll my dice, then let me just get rid of the other ones and let's run this one. So here is the program, the roll dice program. So let's go over with this thing really quick. So here is a new object that I'm creating called random numbers, and this object is actually coming from this class called secure random. So what this secure random class does is basically allows me to create random numbers, and there is also a random class, but as we look into the security aspects, secure random gives you a secured way of generating some of those random numbers. So of course, if I want to use the secure random class, then I have to point to the import library, otherwise it's not going to recognize my secure random. So here is my secure random object, and I named it random numbers. And again, just like any time we create any objects, like what we have seen before, or also even in my array, I would use the keyword new. So random numbers is my object, and then new secure random, and then I create an array which is of the type integer. So it's a data type integer, and I named my array frequency, and it has 7. So I have 7 space, or my length of the array is 7. And what I'm doing here is I am going to roll this dice 60,000 times, actually more than that. Why don't I first of all let's do this, let's do it 50 times, okay? Because really what it should be happening is when I look at this frequency over here, this frequency should be adding up. So if I add up all these numbers, it should come up to 50. So let's go over the code for just a minute. So this line number 21 just creates my array called frequency, and then I have a for statement where I have my counter, and I would start with my roll, and I would set it at 1. I do not want my face to have, you see this face right here, even though I define my array size as 7, I would really want to start off with 1 through 6. I don't want to get into the zeroth phase as such, okay? So I would start off with 1, and I would say if I roll it 50 times, this is less than equals 50, and then I would come in and basically add it to my frequency. So I can actually have these faces, you know, 6 faces with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So I can basically get all these 6 faces, and I can roll the dice, and every time I roll one, it is going to add it to my frequency counter. And again, by doing my 1 plus, I'm basically starting from my phase 1. So when I roll it, if my phase shows 1, then this is the number of times it had rolled. Now initially I was going with a lot higher of a number, that's why my frequency was a lot higher. Okay, so then again I would roll it one more time, and then if I get another 1, then it would go back and add it to my frequency counter of 1. But if I happen to roll a 2, then it's going to add to my frequency counter of 2, and then 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so by taking this value in, and again look at this little method over here, next int 6. So I would allow up to 6 counts. Okay, and then once I show, or once I add up all my frequency, I'm just going to come in and do a system out print line. And again, this is just formatting %s, %10s. So now I would have this phase and then frequency, and again I would allow some space, and then I would come in for int phase equals 1, phase less than the frequency length. So I would start off again with 1, and I would look to see how big my array length is, and then I would come in and do phase and frequency phase. So I would say, okay, my phase of 1 had happened this many times, my phase of 2 had happened this many times. So if I now roll it, and then again you see that I have now reduced the number, and actually let's reduce it to maybe 10. Okay, so now if I run it, roll dice, and if I do it, I will proceed. Now look at what happens. So I have 1 rolled 1 time, 2 rolled 0 times. Remember, this is a very small number, 10. 3 rolled 3 times, 4 rolled 2 times, 5 rolled 4 times. So if I add it up, 1 plus 3, 4 plus 2, 6 plus 4, 10. So I rolled it 10 times, and that is what I get. Now, of course, if I make it a little more, then I can always see what I'm going to get. So my 1 goes up 24 times, 2 14 times. So this is how, and again if I add this thing up, it should end up with 100. Now remember, I was talking about this next int. What if I don't allow all these 6 phases? I can actually change it. If I say, I only want to see up to, let's say, 3. Okay, so then if I now run it, okay, see what happens. Now I'm only going to allow up to 3 phases. I'm not allowing 4, 5 and 6. So now again it is 100 times. So 30, 31 and 39, if I add it up, it should be adding up to 100. Okay, so again if I go back and change it, again depending upon the number of phases it would allow, it would, if you roll a dice, it will say it would go all the way from 1 through 6, and that is why you have this 6 over here. All right, so simple program over here. Let me come back to this, and at this point this is my frequency, and now I'm using another array statement or array program where I'm basically utilizing the array to calculate a poll. So in this case I have a 20 element int array, and I also give them a frequency count, responses 1 through 5. So basically it's a poll where 1 would be awful and 5 would be excellent. So that is my validity of my response. Okay, and I would count to see how many of them gets added. And another thing that I'm going to use in this program is a try catch, which means I am going to also try to catch if somebody gives me a response other than 1 through 5. So again, when I'm taking a poll, if somebody inputs 7, that is not a valid response. All right, so for my array response, Let me bring the program now. So here is my program for the array response. As you can see, I am collecting up to 20 polls. Now, this is also the part where you can actually make it a little interactive. You see how I am starting with some basic hard-coded numbers. And look what I had done. I had done 1 all the way to 20 times, but again, all my responses are within my valid response style. So 1 through 5. So let's look into the program just a little bit. So here is my responses. This is an array, and it is an integer array, and this is where it would actually pick up and create a size of an array where however many responses I would put in. And then here is my frequency. This is another array that I have, and in this one I created my frequency, and again this is my how many I want to collect. Okay, and now I have a for statement where I start off with an answer. So if my answer is 0, this is my counter, answer less than my responses.length. So here is my response array. So there are 2 arrays. One is the response array, one is the frequency array. So here is my length, and then just like I had seen in the other one, I'm increasing my frequency counter. So again, it kind of goes from right to the left. So let's start off with responses. So this is my responses, and this is my answer. So what my answer is 0, so my response 0 would be 1. Okay, so as soon as I get 1, I'm going to add it to my frequency counter. Okay, now then I would go, now this is my try block. Okay, now what I also have is a catch block. So if anybody would have included anything other than 1 through 5, it should come out from the try and try to catch this exception right over here. Okay, so if I go back to my for statement again, remember my answer is going to be incremented by 1 now. Okay, and now if I'm going to come in and say, okay, this is my 1 at this point, and then I'm going to take that value and again come back and add it to my frequency counter. Okay, now once I go through my entire response.length, I'm also doing system out printf. Here is my response, and again I'm just formatting it up. So it is my %d, %n, %n, my answer, and my responses. Okay, and then I'm going to just go ahead and do a rating and frequency and then display the value out. So let me run this program. So this is not the program here. Okay, so here is my rating and response. So how many of 1 rating do I have? So I have 1, 2, 3. So I have 3 1 rating. How many of 2 rating do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why I have 2 of the 4 ratings. I have 8 3 ratings. I have 4 3 ratings and 2 of the 5 ratings. Now in this one, of course, you did not catch any exception because every single response was within that 1 through 5. Let's go ahead and change this thing to maybe somebody input 7. Okay, now if I do that, let me come back, and this is my student poll, and I'm doing okay. I proceed. So now it says, okay, in this section, so let's look into the catch statement. So this is where I'm trying. So I'm going through every single response and adding it to my frequency. Okay, and then I say if I do find something which does not fit, this is where I'm going to catch it. So it's array index out of bound exception. So remember when I created my response, I said this has to be something between 1 through 5, and if it is outside that, that is where I'm catching it. So I'm basically going to say system out println e, so whatever that response is. So this is my array bound exception. okay, and the value that somebody input is 7, and this is stored in response number 19. Basically, this is where it's stored. Now, if I would have put a 7 over here, it should have said it is caught in response number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then this response 9 is where I would have had my 7. Okay, but then it went through and rated all my frequencies. Okay, so let me run this program right here, and then you will see that this has been caught at 7, and this is my rating versus frequency. Let's continue with this. So this is my program that I just showed you, and this is also using the try catch, and this is where they're referring to the bounds checking. So if I'm creating something 1 through 5, you know, whatever you are allowing, this is going to check for that. Anything more than that, it's going to catch that as an exception and you know, give you that message. So already spoke about that. Try statement, index out of bound. So let's look into this enhanced for, and in this one the only thing that we are showing here is there is also a different way of writing our for statements, and I'm going to bring my program over here. So just how you are writing your for statement, you can rewrite your for statement like this, where you are just passing in for, and then this is the variable that you are creating. That's an integer variable, and you're passing your array. So you're basically going through your array and saying, okay, if I want to go through my array, I'm just going to add everything to my number. So remember, my total at this point is 0. So basically what I'm doing here is I am adding all these values and then displaying the value out. So it's the total of all my array elements. So if I run it now, proceed, and it says total array of elements is 849. Now if I want to actually print it out, I can also write a for statement and basically print out every single thing that I have. So this is another way of writing your for statement. There are some limitation of this for statement. As you can see over here, this can only be used to obtain array elements. It cannot be used to modify. Okay, so if you're trying to print something, you're trying to add something, that is when you can use that for statement. You really cannot do anything to edit or modify that element. Okay, let's continue on, and this is another a program that I would like to spend some time on. This is my passing array. So when we are talking about passing some values, we can also do the same thing with my pass array. So let me first of all run this program, and we'll go over this once we run this program. So let's go through this. Proceed. Okay. So here is my class called pass array, and inside I have a main method, and then I define an array, and this is an array I am arbitrarily adding some values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now here is my system out printf, and here is my statement effect of passing. So if I now look into the program and see how it's running, so I would start off with this effects of passing reference. So here is my statement right over here, okay, which is coming from line number 18, and then line number 20, which is the value of original array. And now I'm using that enhanced for, and look what I'm doing here. So for, this is where I'm storing that value, and I'm actually going through my array that I just created, okay, and then I'm saying system out print and %d value. So basically every value that I have, and I've also given some space, so that's why you have 1 and then space 2 and 3, 4, and 5. So this is what I have in my array currently stored. Okay, line number 27, I call this method called modify array. Now something to be noted, when I am passing an entire array, okay, the only thing I got to do is pass the name. So modify array is my program, and then I just pass the array name. So let's look into this program, modify array. So if I go down, and here is my modify array method. Okay, now look at this method. It's a public static void, so it is not going to return anything. Modify. Okay, and what is it that I'm passing? So I am actually passing array2, and it is an integer type. So when I call the method, I am only calling the method and passing the array. All right, so this is the object that I'm passing, or this is the array reference that I'm passing, or not the array reference. But in here, I set it up where I have to specify, when I'm setting it up, as to what kind of array I'm passing, and this is just a variable name that I have. Okay, and I said, and inside my modify array, I go through my counter as long as this array2, the value that I'm passing. And remember, what is my array2? This is the reference to this array. Okay, so as soon as I'm passing that, it's array.length. So now it is going to multiply that by 2. So basically in my array, whatever I had initially, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, this is going to be multiplied by 2. So this becomes 2, this becomes 4, this becomes 6, 8, and 10. All right. So that is my modify array. Okay. So when I call this method called modify array and pass this array, and this is my array with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then I write my system out print line saying the values of the modified array are, okay, and then the values of my modified arrays are 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, right? So that's my array that I just passed, right? So now I'm saying effects of passing array element value. Okay, so now I come over here, line number 35, system out print line, effects of passing array element value, and array3 before modify element, and then I'm passing array3. Okay, so if I look at my array3, so modify element, and this is what I'm passing. Okay, so now if I look at my modify element, again, if I come to my modify element over here, now look what I'm doing over here. In modify element, what I'm doing is I'm actually passing the individual elements. Okay, so public static void modify element, and look what it's doing over here. So now you are basically passing this variable called element, which is of the type integer. And again, if you go back and see what my array is, and these are my elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so that's what I am passing. So initially I'm showing how I'm passing an entire array, and then I'm showing how I'm passing the individual elements. Okay, I'm multiplying that by 2. So what it's telling you is the next time, okay, I actually went and passed the third element of this array, which was 8. So if I go 0, 1, 2, 3, so this is 8. Now after I run it through the modify element, the value is 16. Okay, but when I come back and say after I do my modify element, okay, so when I say my system out printf, after I do this, I pass it again, my original value still stays at 8. So what it's trying to tell you is when you are passing by value, then it makes a copy and works on that copy. That is why the original still stays the same. However, if you pass it by reference, you can actually reference to the original array, and that's when your original value or original array gets changed. Okay, so here is an example of passing your array, and I'm passing the entire array where I have to pass it by reference, and then I'm actually changing the array. However, when I pass the individual elements, I'm actually making a copy. So even if I change anything to that element, my original still stays the same. So here is our program for that. So let's continue on. And this is where I would pay attention. So pass by value, call by value. So this is where I make a copy. But when I call my reference, then I'm actually passing the entire reference to the argument, and then it changes the value. And look at this one, improves the performance of eliminating the need to copy. So it does improve the performance as such. Okay, and it tells you about the difference between pass by value and by reference. So in Java, everything is passed by value, but when I'm doing a method call, it can be differentiated as to primitive and references to objects. So when I do this primitive, then it is by value, but when I do this reference, okay, that is where I'm going to come by this value of reference. So I'm passing the reference, and that is why it gets changed, right?